Okay, I want to encourage folks to come on in, sit down. There's plenty of seats in front. And I want to welcome everyone to the first of 4 sessions on intelligent energy systems. My name is Debbie Liu. I am the Executive Director of the Energy Systems Integration Group, and I, along with Jamila Amadeo, who's right here in red, are co-chairing track 4 this week. Today we're going to talk about decentralized grids, a dynamic distribution system with two-way flows. We're going to talk about the technology, the artificial intelligence, the analytics, and the Internet of Things that are needed to enable that transformation. Now, before we get started, I'm going to ask everyone to pull out their phones and to go to the Whova app. So if you go to this Whova app, hopefully everyone has it. There is if you open the agenda for this session, there's a poll. And if you go into the poll, it'll ask who you work for, basically what sector of industry you're in. And this is going to help the speakers understand who's in the audience, who we're talking to, what people's interests are, help folks fine-tune their remarks today. So please go to session 4.1 in the Whova app and fill out the poll. So today we're focusing on smart grid integration, real-time energy management, and we are going to hear from some fantastic speakers. Now, unfortunately, they're not sitting right here because we don't want their heads to block the screen, but maybe I can ask them to stand up as I introduce them. Dr. Soe Thiri Thandar is the Director of Solarise SIS and a Senior Consultant at Five Lakes Energy. That's a US-based clean energy consulting firm, and she's currently residing in Myanmar. She's going to talk about virtual power plants, that infrastructure, and VPP country readiness across Southeast Asia. And then we'll have Rifnas Ahmed of Energy Distribution Lanka and Sri Lanka. He's the project manager under the ADB-funded Smart Distribution Control Center project. He'll be talking about visibility and management of DERs and the grid architecture that you need to support that. And then we'll hear from Setasit Chardgarun, the head of the Energy Storage System Business Section in EGAT and the lead for V2G and VPP projects in Thailand. He'll be talking about integration. For all of you electrical engineers out there, I just found out that his nickname is Ohm. So his dad was also an electrical engineer and had a great sense of humor. Then we'll hear from Jonathan Tan, the general manager of ComApp Southeast Asia. This is a Czech Republic company, and Jonathan is based in Singapore. He'll talk about energy management systems for microgrids that can be islanded or participating in the market. And then finally, but last but not least, we'll hear from Paolo Tanarte, who is the power systems business leader of Schneider Electric Philippines. He's going to talk about microgrids. So I'm just going to take a look at this poll that we have asked folks to fill out. So if you haven't filled out the poll, fill out the poll so we have a sense of who's in the audience. And for those of you who are coming in just now, there are seats in the front. So please come up to the front, and there are seats up here. And it sounds like we've got a good balance of folks across utilities, regulators, power plant developers, vendors, financiers, and investors, with the majority of folks being in the consulting business. So that's a sense of who all is in the audience. Now, I'm first going to invite up to the podium Peter Baum, who is a senior energy specialist at the Asian Development Bank, working on smart grid, electric vehicles, virtual power plants, and financing solutions to set the stage for us on this topic. So, Peter.
All right. Thank you very much, Debbie. And thanks also, Jamila and Debbie, for asking me to join this session. In preparation of these sessions, I thought about what I can tell you today to set the scene. Some deliberations on the value of grid flexibility, my thoughts on power market design, or the increasing role of digitalization in the power sector. But we have wonderful speakers with us today that will go into these questions. And instead, I want to talk to you about a phone call I had with my aunt a couple of weeks back. So my aunt calls me and says, "Peter, you work on energy. I just went to the local supermarket and saw a balcony solar PV kit. It's below $1,000, 800 watt. What do you think? Shall I get this?" This is a local supermarket, nothing fancy. I did what you do when family calls, and I sat down and looked at it. And the business case is solid. The payback period in cloudy Germany is about 3 years. It's 100% plug and play, and it has the ability to even feed back into the grid. Of course, this panel is not going to be about my aunt or her power supply, balcony, or supermarket, but it is a sign that we're not moving to a more centralized system. Germany alone has 5 million rooftop PVs. Australia, with less than half of the population, 4.4 million, or to come back to the region, Vietnam's solar rooftop is in the 100,000s, or more than 10 gigawatts just on rooftops. A mere 20 years ago, these same systems ran mainly on a few dozens of power plants, either coal, where applicable, nuclear power plants, and these were all controlled centrally. And this is how the systems were designed. Generate power in large plants, move them long distances over high voltage lines, step them down through substations, and deliver to a passive consumer at the end of the wire. The whole architecture was built around that logic, centralized, flowing one way. But the world is changing, and it's changing fast. Solar growth alone is very impressive, and it remains exponential. Over 600 gigawatts of solar were added in 2025, and 200 gigawatts out of that on rooftops. Recalling from Energy Economics 101 that electricity is a peculiar good, and where demand and supply always need to be balanced at all times. So meaning when the sun shines, we have a lot, and when it doesn't, we don't. But that's only half of the story. The acceleration of deployment of battery storage systems has taken off and has now overtaken pumped storage as the biggest source of energy storage. 250 gigawatts globally are deployed, and it's growing at a 50% annual growth. This is adding another major distributed resource to the mix, and a time dimension as well. And then we come to electrification of transport. We already 77 million EVs on the road globally, and only last year 20 million were added to this. And this trend is accelerating very, very quickly. We'll have a speaker from Thailand where you can see this. If we move over to Vietnam or to China, we see how many EVs are coming to the road. This means millions of new distributed loads on the grid, and at the same time, millions of batteries on wheels that are added each year. In addition, we are seeing other power demand becoming more flexible, and there will be other sessions dedicated to this during ASEF, adding more flexibility to the grid. Managing this complexity, a wealth of solar, storage systems, and flexible demand in real time requires capabilities that most grids, most utilities, and most regulatory frameworks were never designed to deal with. You need visibility, knowing what is actually happening at the edges of the network, not 10 minutes ago, but right now. You need forecasting and anticipating how a cloud might impact your solar production and how it will affect voltage in the next 5 minutes. You need intelligent control, the ability to respond to variability without simply curtailing your clean energy. And you need markets and market structures, trading and coordination frameworks that treat distributed resources as valuable assets to be used and not problems to be managed, and that set the incentives accordingly. These are all complex but not unsolved problems, and hold the key to a more intelligent, more competitive, more reliable, and more resilient energy system. And this is, I think, what makes this session truly remarkable and interesting today. The presenters joining us today will not describe a vision or present a roadmap, but they're showing what is already being built and deployed in the region today. You will hear from a utility operating a grid where non-conventional renewables already account for nearly half of installed capacity, not as a future scenario, but today. They will walk you through how they are using advanced forecasting, real-time monitoring, and intelligent curtailment to maintain stability on the system. You will hear about a framework for how power trading can be redesigned to coordinate distributed energy resources, all of them rooftop solar, EVs, demand-side flexibility, in distribution systems that might not have been designed for it. And you will also hear how a utility is forging ahead with the integration of EV charging in its power system, redefining the challenge of a rapidly growing load to a new flexibility resource. Across all of this, you will see that even though we like to talk about technology, this is not the major bottleneck. The question for utilities, for regulators, for investors, and for all of us in the room today is whether the surrounding ecosystem can move at the same pace, whether frameworks, institutions, and the capital can keep up with the technology. And with that, I look very much forward to the discussions this afternoon. I wish you a great session, and please, I'd like to encourage you to participate actively. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Peter, for that great introduction. There are seats up front if you would like to come from the back and sit in the second row here. And I'd like to next invite Dr. Soitiri Tandar from Five Lakes Energy to talk about VPP readiness in Southeast Asia.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me today. My name is Soitiri Tandar. I prefer to go by Thiri, she her pronouns. I'm a senior consultant with Five Lakes Energy in the United States and director of Solarisis in Myanmar. Today, I will share observations from a literature study exploring virtual power plant readiness across Southeast Asia region, focusing on enabling conditions needed to support future VPP deployment, and I'll focus on the broader ecosystem. And I'll cover two sessions today. The first will be what the VPP are and why they matter, and the second, the key dimensions used to explore the readiness. So let me start with the most fundamental question. What is a virtual power plant? So a VPP is a software-enabled system that coordinates the multiple distributed energy resources, DERs, and operates them as a single flexible grid resource. These resources can include rooftop solar, battery storage, EV chargers, smart buildings, and demand response programs. The key idea is that the VPP transforms individual energy assets into a coordinated network that can support the grid more effectively. Its value comes from not a single asset, but from the ability to aggregate, optimize, and orchestrate many resources to add as one. So traditionally, power systems rely on large centralized power plants to provide flexibility and maintain system balance. However, today grid is becoming increasingly decentralized. Passive customer assets such as solar system batteries, EVs, the smart appliance, and flexible loads are being connected to the grid. Individually, these assets have limited impact, but when aggregated through a VPP, they can collectively provide meaningful grid services, which can create the benefits for all the stakeholders as a whole. And the VPP ecosystems require a set of enabling conditions that allow these resources to communicate, participate in the market, and provide value to the grid. The first enabler is policy and regulations. Governments and regulators need to establish clear rules that recognize distributed energy resources, DERs, and allow them to participate in the grid operations and energy markets. The second is the market and tariffs. The VPP needs economic signals and compensation mechanism that reward flexibility and demand response in distributed generation. Third is standards and interoperability. The VPP depends on the thousands and thousands of devices working together. Command technical standards and communication protocols are essential for safe and reliable and scalable operations. The fourth is the data access and privacy. VPP rely heavily on real-time data. At the same time, customer information must be protected through appropriate cybersecurity, privacy, and data governance frameworks. Finally, the capacity building, which has also been discussed in the morning opening remarks and sessions, which is very important in the Southeast Asia region. Successful VPP deployments require the skilled technology providers and aggregators, consumers. The human capital is one of the most critical factors for long-term success of the VPP deployment in the region. So ASEAN region is expected to account for approximately 25% of global energy demand growth, and it is growing exponentially year by year and making it one of the most faster growing energy markets. And through ASEAN Power Grid Initiative, interconnection capacity is expected to increase significantly by 2040, creating opportunities for more coordinated and flexible grid operations. So I'd like to highlight more on the market potential in the ASEAN region. To explore the readiness in the region, I've developed a VPP readiness assessment framework by using these 5 pillars. Number 1 is AMI, Advanced Metering Infrastructure, provides the data and two-way communication needed for the VPP operations. Second, the SCADA and the ADMS, Advanced Distribution Management System, give utilities visibility and operation control over the distribution network. Third, DERMS, DERMS, Distribution Energy Resource Management Systems, enable the aggregation, optimization, and dispatch DERs. Number 4 is the electricity market design, which creates the market signals and financial incentive that make the VPP participation viable. And the last one, and the final one, is the DER density and the grid codes, which ensure there are sufficient resources and the technical standards needed to integrate them safely and reliably. Together, these 5 elements form the foundation of my assessment, literature assessment framework. I evaluated each country against these 5 pillars using 0 to 5 score, where higher score includes a stronger readiness for VPP deployment, and this is intended as a high-level indicative assessment rather than the definitive ranking. Let's look at the following slide. So the countries can be broadly grouped into 3 categories based on the marks or the scorecard. Singapore stands out as the regional leader, supported by advanced digital infrastructure, strong regulatory framework, and smart metering deployment, and active VPP pilot programs. Thailand, Malaysia, and Vietnam fall into the following developing readiness category, but these countries has made significant progress in the DER deployment, but still needs the readiness in some other aspects as well. And the remaining countries are currently in the very early stage of the readiness in all aspects, and they are still growing. And I'd like to share 2 case studies representing the different stages of VPP journey. So the first one is the Viridian at County Farm Ann Arbor in Michigan, which I had the opportunity to visit in October. The project was designed as a community scale solar power plant. The scale was 1.3 megawatt, and the housing organizers and the utility, they has been taking more than 4 years to get it on live. So the discussion is on progress, and it is not on live yet. So, and another case is Singapore, which takes a more top-down and a market-driven approach through the regulatory sandbox led by EME. And Singapore has created a structured environment for testing the VPP concept and market participation and grid service. Together, these two examples illustrate that different pathways toward the DVB deployment. So Andover demonstrates the challenges, and the Singapore demonstrates the successful case studies. So one observation from my assessment is that countries in the prepare and the least developing stage should not necessarily view themselves as being behind. In fact, they may have a unique opportunity to leapfrog. They have an opportunity to integrate the VPP-ready capabilities from the beginning rather than retrofitting them later. So with that, let me conclude by thanking you for listening to me, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Thierry, for that great talk. I'd now would like to invite up Rifnas Ahmed of Energy Distribution Lanka to talk about visibility management of DERs. Rifnas?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Rifnas Ahmed, project manager representing Electricity Distribution Lanka Private Limited, national utility in Sri Lanka. Today, I will share a system we built to manage our growing distributed energy resources, energy fleets, using the infrastructure we already had. Sri Lanka has about 7,300 megawatts of total installed capacity. Nearly half, 49% of is now distributed renewable energy. We have about 150,000 solar connections on our network, serving about 7.6 million customers. The growth created four real problems for us. First, we had no real-time view of what all these distributed generators were producing. We were operating sort of like blind. Second, without forecasting, we only discovered excess solar generation after it was already a problem. Third, we had no reliable way to reduce generation quickly when grid frequency was at risk. The fourth, when we did generation management, we were not precise. Sometimes it created a new sort of imbalances. So these four problems are not unique to Sri Lanka. Any utility managing rapid distributed energy growth will face the same challenges. Sri Lanka is already working on long-term solutions. Large-scale battery storage, demand-side management, and grid modernization programs are underway. These will fundamentally change how we manage renewable energy in the future. But these takes time to deploy at scale. In the meantime, our grid operators face these challenges every day right now. So what we build is a practical solution for today using the infrastructure we already have to manage operational challenges until a full long-term solution is in place. Our response was 3 integrated capabilities, all built into one solution called CEB Assist Utility Solutions, which we developed in-house with our own resources. For monitoring, we combined smart meter data from our in-house AMI platform with IoT modem installed at each their plants. Together, this gives a real-time view of distributed renewable fleet. For forecasting, we use a commercial machine learning model trained on weather and irradiance data. It covers all solar plants, including rooftop installation, and gives us a generation estimate hours ahead. For generation management, we build hybrid control systems for inverter-based ground-mounted solar plants. For inverter-based ground-mounted solar plants, we send set points via IoT modems directly to the plant inverter. So this is fully automatic. No need to go to the site for any interventions. Again, for other plants which are not IoT modem connected, we send notification to our regional distribution control center. From there, our control staff handling the coordination. So altogether, both these things are working to the same platform. The key principle throughout is we build on an infrastructure that already had without going for a large-scale greenfield investment. The monitoring part, this is an actual screenshot of our live system. The left chart shows the real-time renewable energy generation profile taken from the AMI and IoT devices. The right chart shows the total national generation curve, including thermal and major hydro. You can see solar fits into the overall, how this solar fits into the overall picture, and how it creates the midday surplus that must be managed carefully. So this RE visibility updated every 5 minutes is the foundation of everything else I'm talking after this. The forecasting, this is our solar generation forecasting dashboard. The orange curve is the P50 forecast, the expected generation for full national PV fleet, including the all rooftop solar. The blue area shows cumulative energy for that day. The forecast gives our system operators hours of advance notice before high generation period arrives. Before these, our operators reacted to problems. Now they plan ahead. Emergency generation management become a true last resort rather than a first response. Generation management, the third aspect. This slide addresses what I believe the hardest challenge. The distributed energy resource plants are privately owned. We cannot simply take control of customer assets. The solution had to work within the regulatory and commercial considerations. So we designed a hybrid approach for an API controlled plant, mainly the ground mounted solar. An IoT modem at the plant connects to our head-end system. For the CB Assist, our main solution sends the set point via API. The inverters respond automatically, maybe within 3 or 4 seconds. And zero on-site intervention needed for this generation management through the API plant. For other plant types, wind, mini hydro, or biomass, we send structured notification to our provincial distribution control center who coordinate in the field. In recent days, we are even testing API control platform for these type of plants also, like wind and other mini hydros also. The screenshot on the right side shows the real plant view, actual output versus set point versus the forecast. The curtail energy counter in the top rightmost shows the exactly how much energy we managed. Every event is recorded and traceable. Operational evidence. This is our actual log where the generation managed execution part is taking place. You can see the real curtailment and restoration job with job IDs, target capacities, plant counts, and execution times. Every dispatch is timestamped and auditable. This is not a test system. This is running on our national grid. Solution architecture. The architecture has 4 layers: plant, data, platform, and operations. What I want to highlight is this. We integrated with smart meters that already existed and IoT infrastructure with very minimal greenfield investments. And this same infrastructure layer will become the foundation for battery storage and demand response in the future. What we have demonstrated, a hybrid AMI and IoT platform monitoring works at national scale. ML forecasting is a practical even with a partial coverage. It doesn't need to be a full coverage. Even with a partial coverage with estimation and sort of arrangement, we can go for an ML. And remote automated control via IoT is a proven fact and with our experience. And again, a single platform, single unified utility platform can serve both distribution utility as well the system operator across both the section. Both are working on the same utility platform. What we have not sold yet is rooftop solar. It is about 2,400 megawatts. About 70% of our NCRE fleet is not yet within our control scope, but it's monitorable, but it's not in our control scope. This is our biggest remaining gap. Scaling up to 150,000 rooftop installation requires solving customer consent and regulatory framework. And we need battery storage to move from emergency management to proactive planning, which we are already working on in large scale. A transferable lesson to other emerging economies. 5 lessons for any utility starting with this journey. 1, start with visibility. Even a partial monitoring changes how our operators works. Rather than waiting for a full-fledged solutions, starting with what is available will give a additional visibility for our operators. 2, forecast before you act. It transforms your operations from the reactive to planned one. 3, design for what you have. A hybrid system that works today is better than the perfect system that takes 5 or 10 years. 4, build for what comes next. The infrastructure you build today becomes your battery storage platform tomorrow. 5, keep the capability in-house. You will build better systems faster at lower cost. An intelligent energy system is not defined by the technology it uses. It's defined by whether the technology helps operators make better decisions about real energy flows on a real grid. Sri Lanka's experience shows this is possible today in an emerging economy with the infrastructure that already exists. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Raghunas, for that great deep dive into how you're managing solar in Sri Lanka. Next, I'd like to invite up to the podium Om Setasit Chardgarun from EGAT of Thailand. And for those of you in the back, there are maybe a couple seats in the front, maybe 2 or 3 there.
Hai, magandang araw sa inyong lahat. Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Setasit Chardgarun. I am head of energy storage business section from EGAT, Electricity Generating Authority of Thailand. Today, I'm going to tell you about what is situation of VGI, Vehicle to Grid Integration Program, and what next of Vehicle to Grid Integration. EGAT is state-owned enterprise under Ministry of the Energy and Ministry of Finance. We generate the power, we transmit the power to distribution utilities, MEA and PA. We increase more renewable energy, and we have the field business. We are also system operator to control the frequency for the whole country. And we had just established a demand response control center to take care about all these DER, distributed energy resources. And we had just established a RE forecasting control center to forecast about renewable energy in near future. EGAT tried to invest more a small modular reactor to achieve carbon net zero in the next 12 years. And we try to co-fire hydrogen in the power plant, and we would like to do the CCUS, carbon capture and storage. And we plan to invest the solar power around 2 gigawatts. From the National Energy Plan roadmap, we would like to increase more renewable energy with ESS to be 50% by 12 years. And we try to have EV 30 at 30. So EV is not just the car. EV can be energy storage in the future. The concept of the PDP 2026 of the policymaker, they try to have promoting the direct PPA, TPA, third-party access, renewable energy certificate, V2G or VGI that we're talking about today, and demand response virtual power plant. So when we would like to increase more renewable energy, flexibility resource need to be considering. So EGAT tried to test vehicle grid integration we test around 5 years ago. Until now, we found that vehicle can be energy storage. So we had just established virtual power plant control center to dispatch this DER. This is an operation concept for Thai context. For the first pilot projects 3 years ago, we command to the RCC command to the load aggregator and connect to a DR participant. But now we try to have the new aggregator. And then in the nearly future, we try to set up the rule and regulation to have the aggregator. This is a PDP plan. We would like to do the DR or V2G around 2 gigawatt in the peaking time overnight. So we need a number of the electric vehicle that can do the vehicle grid dedication. How does it work? Our idea, we would like to discharge energy back to the household when they come back to their home, and we will dispatch together in the same time. We can get around 1.8 gigawatt discharging overnight. This is our concept that we try to achieve. And then when tonight we have to discharge again, we can ramp up the power plant in night time when we don't have the load anymore. We can control charge discharge when we would like to get. This is a VGI sandbox that we have done so far. We dispatch from a demand response control to the watt drive platform to the bidirectional charger with a Nissan Leaf 11 unit. And we found that we have to have the grid code. This is the platform that we developed by ourselves. We can get the receive command from the demand response control center, and we can dispatch directly to the bidirectional charger. It's worked very well. The response time is within 1 minute. So we already test the frequency regulation tertiary reserve already. It's worked very well. So that's why we would like to scale it up to be the huge number of electric vehicle. This graph shows that this is the red line is a target that VPP control center would like to get, and what drive can serve the green line already. This is it firm that vehicle can be the virtual power plant. So this is the next step that we try to achieve next year. We try to scale up electric vehicle. So the cost of the charger is more important. So EGAT tried to develop the new bidirectional charger by ourselves by using the ISO 15118.20 protocol and test with the majority brand in Thailand, such as BYD, MG, and GAC Ion. We can reach the 100,000 unit in the next year. So the customer can get benefit. They can reduce their costs every day, and we can earn the grid flexibility. But the regulation have to change as well. So we are work closely with ADB to help us to decide the market rule and the regulation with the regulator and policymaker. For the demand response, have to open the data access from smart meter. This is a bottleneck that we have to achieve, but EGAT, we try to use the sub-metering instead of using metering from the MEA and PEA. This is a MEA grid code that we test with the laboratory. We know that we have to set up the grid code of the inverter of the bidirectional charger. This is a V2G testing that we have done so far. We inject the power back to the grid, 5.46 kilowatt back to MEA area and PEA area as well, around 3.6 kilowatt. Okay, key takeaway that I would like to talking about is a grid code, inverter code must be clearly defined and established. And we have to clear rule and incentive and pricing structure have to take into the account. Technology is ready, available, and mature. Regulatory have to establish. Okay, all this stuff that we have done so far. Thank you so much. Salamat.
Thank you so much, Om, for that fascinating discussion of B2G in Thailand. I'd now like to invite up to the podium Jonathan Tan, the General Manager of ComApp Southeast Asia. And there's still a couple seats in the front for those of you who are standing.
Okay, good afternoon, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, my fellow speaker and distinguished guests and visitors who are attending this forum. My name is Jonathan. I came from a Czech Republic company called ComApp. Today, my topic of sharing will be on the energy management system solution. So the recent surge in the oil price has actually triggered an alarm to government and also to business owner, because everybody have to pay more prices for the energy that they're going to use. So now the government is looking more into green energies, where they are looking to explore putting in more resources for renewable energies, green energies that can help to be more sustainable. And from the business owner perspective, they would like to explore solutions for cheap, resilient, and also sustainable energy. Having said so, we noticed that there are a lot of renewable projects being executed globally, a lot of these projects, but particularly in Southeast Asia region. Why is it so? Because aside from huge population, we also have abundance of sunlight and wind energy. So by transforming all this sun, wind energy, we can actually put this energy in and to redistribute it in a more effective and efficient way. So all these segments you can see from rural electrification, factory microgrid, data center microgrid, and even a microgrid for institute. Even utility scale has been putting in a lot of this renewable system, mainly for PV smoothing and also to manage the grid fluctuation. So traditionally, this is how a power generation system looks like. The red line is the power line. So we will have the grid feeding the power to the load, and of course, we will have a generator as a backup. So when the grid fails, generator will take over. So because of the renewable energy, so business owner now decided to add in solar PV plus inverters. But after adding the inverters and the PV, they realized that actually they can harvest even more. So why want to waste the energy? So they decided to add in a battery energy storage system. Now, having 4 different energy sources, how are they supposed to manage and redistribute the energy in an optimized way? So now we need to add in a energy management system solution for this project. So all this energy management system will have to interface with different DERs. So our EMS system will need to talk to the battery PCS, solar panel inverters, genset local controllers. So having set up the communication protocol, I will be able to run this whole microgrid in a safe and effective manner. So now I will briefly describe to you the relationship between the local device and the EMS system. So all the local devices, be it PCS, be it the inverters, EV charger, genset controller, they all have their local devices. So all these local devices will take care of the protection of their own devices and work in the way that they are designed for. We call this a primary control devices. So on top of it, we will have a secondary control level, which is where the EMS controller sits. So this EMS controller will take care of the import-export limit, will take care of the VFPQ, will take care also of the islanding selection. So all these devices will be communicating to the EMS control via Modbus. And we call this a secondary control device. So on top of it, we will have the tertiary control. Tertiary control is mainly power supply office or some energy management authority. So this authority will also like to monitor how much power is being harvested, how much energy is being redistributed. So we will have to communicate to the tertiary control via Modbus protocol. So this is a part where we are taking care of, which is the energy management system. It might look very simple, small scope, but actually it is the brain of the whole microgrid project. This shows a simple EMS control architect. So we have the mains controller, which is also known as the primary control. And then we will have the genset controller, another primary control. And then we will have the secondary control, which is the EMS controller. You can see on the green line, this is the internal CAN bus protocol where different controllers are communicate on this CAN bus protocol. On the third-party devices like batteries, PCS, BMS, solar panel inverters, these are being communicated through Modbus protocol. So I have done a lot of a project where business owner, site owner, EPC expect every device to work in the way they want. Everybody wants a plug-and-play system. But based on my experiences, it never happened. It all ends up plug-and-play system. You plug in and then you pray hard that it works. So having talked about EMS, so we also want to know about what is EMS. So what do we expect from this EMS? So we expect this EMS to be able to optimize dispatch of power sources. So no energy should be wasted because doesn't mean it is free, we need to waste the energy. So we need to ensure all the PV energy being harvested is used to feed the load. Additional is being able to charge the battery. Another important part will be the power management sources. So we need to curtail the power when, let's say, your PV harvests much higher than the load can consume. You have very low load, but your PV harvest is a lot. We need to do a zero export control to ensure no reverse power to the utility. Or worse still, if it reverse power back to the generator, your generator will end up being a motor. So we are also be able to control and start the n number of generators based on the load requirement. If I need more, I will start more generators. If I don't need, I will just let the battery do the job. So generator will be on standby. So another important features will be able to perform the peak shaving. So when certain period of time you have a heavy or high tariff, we must be able to say discharge the battery so that we avoid paying penalty for the contract capacity. Another expectation is also on the energy trading or arbitrage. The system should be also able to interface with the authority to get the USEP price. Once I get this USEP price, I will be able to determine when I should start buying electricity, when I should be able to sell electricity. In short, we want to buy low and then sell high. That's how we make some profit from this energy management system. Another part is the interruption. So during the mains failure, battery should take over seamlessly. There should be no zero switching time between different energy sources, whether it is from grid to genset, grid to battery, battery to grid. There should be zero switching time. So in short, all the whole system should be able to perform seamless transfer. So there are also challenges, which we say that nowadays a lot of certification are required, UL, IEC, ISO, so all the system has to comply with all the certification. So with this, it brings to an end of my sharing. Thank you very much.
Jonathan, for talking us through the complexity and potential solutions with microgrids. Next, I'd like to invite up Paolo Tenarte from Schneider Electric, who's going to talk with us further on this topic of microgrids. Again, folks in the back can come up to the front. There are seats. Thanks.
Hello. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Deb. Thank you to good afternoon to my fellow speakers, and thank you, ADB, for for inviting us on this event. I am Paulo Tanarte from Schneider Electric Philippines, currently leading the power system business of Schneider here in the country, and I'm here to share with you how Schneider actually contributes into these grids of the future, or a more sustainable, more digital, more reliable grids with some focus on to microgrids. But before that, please allow me to share with you Schneider's vision of Electricity 4.0. So this is our vision of actually helping our customers to have an end-to-end, to achieve an end-to-end assistance to attain their energy efficiency and sustainability goals, both locally and globally. So Electricity 4.0 actually traces its roots back into 1750s. From the discovery of electricity to mass electrification to discovery of silicon, and then further discovery of solar cells or PV panels that we have been actually working on, most of us here have been very familiar of. With all this development in parallel with the development of industrialization, because as we know right now, industry have their own smart machines powered or fueled by AI, by cloud computing, and IIoT. Electricity has to respond. We call this the new electricity world, or Electricity 4.0. Laying the foundation on that new electricity world is actually digital and electric. Digital for efficiency and decision making, and electric for decarbonization. Together, these two actually gives us a more sustainable, a greener and smarter energy. So with that transformation, let me focus or transition into how we actually applies that kind of transformation into the microgrid space. As we all know, microgrid is the integration of different DERs. DERs I was pertaining to both the power generation side or power generation aspects like the solar, diesel gensets, even utility, and then the loads connected to it, and of course our storage systems. Most commonly of it are actually the battery energy system that is right now making a lot of buzz in the market. Of course, there's a lot of benefit microgrid actually gives or provides to its users. Number one is, of course, having reliable energy or helping these people who have limited access or no access at all to energy. Microgrid is actually a solution that could actually help them. And of course, efficiency and optimization of energy use and greener energy, especially if integrated with renewable energy sources. So there's a lot of microgrid use cases out there, both for utility providers and even for retailers here in the country. We call these retailers as the microgrid service providers or the MGSPs. I won't go into details onto each use cases, but definitely each use cases have their own application depending on the demand, on the need of the owners, of the users, and the limitation also of the regulations and the power system or the existing power and grid. So just a very quick preview of the categories of microgrid. So microgrid could either be connected into the grid or what we call grid tied. It could be totally independent from the grid, or it could actually be a hybrid of both. So what we call islandable, wherein the microgrid users could actually have the option of either they wanted to be connected to the grid or not. And in terms of segmentation, I think Jonathan and I were having a quite good discussion earlier as to how critical it is for us to actually understand the scale of your microgrid. So because different countries, different technology providers, different users could actually be segmented into different microgrid segmentation depending on the need of stakeholders. A residential house could actually be considered already as a microgrid, given that it has the capability to produce its own power. And for some of the residentials can even have their own energy storage, residential scale energy storage, all the way up to utility scale. So this is quite. I was actually looking at the presentation earlier of Jonathan. I've seen the slide that's a little bit similar to this, wherein he presented how EMS is actually being applied into the architecture. So let me show you Schneider's version of it. So we have our own connected products. I think for some of you or most of you here, you know Schneider as a manufacturer of breakers, manufacturer of transformers, of medium voltage switchgears. All those electrical hardwares are actually part of these connected products. And then edge control is actually the one that gives operation into it. So keeping the power system, the powering grid, stable at all times and reliable at all times. And this, I have to borrow your word earlier, Jonathan, because this is also what I prepared. But apps and analytics, energy management system, basically is the brain of microgrid. So I have to agree with you on that one. So this is how we actually help our customers on their energy transformations. Basically, there are three different integrated approach. I won't go into details of each, but each customer that we help on this space are actually not only on this space, but also on the other projects of our customers we've been working with. We help them on their strategy, on how they're going to do their digitization and decarbonization plans. So from baseline establishment, roadmap preparation, all the way to execution, and even after the project decarbonization initiatives, we're keeping ourselves or trying to keep ourselves as present as we could be to our customers. So I guess this is my last slide, and just a very short call to action to everyone. So the moment definitely is now. Technology is available, the value is determined. It is up to us, my colleagues in the industry also, to really take the opportunity to, together we can build a more green, more sustainable, and more digital power system. And with that, I have to close my talk. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Paulo. I'd like to invite all of the speakers to please come up and sit in these seats right here, and hopefully that will free up seats for folks in the back to sit down. We're going to have a discussion session, then I'm going to open it up for a Q&A from the audience. But please come on up and take a seat. Thanks. Those were fantastic presentations. So I wanted to start the discussion by asking Rifnus. You talked about communications and control of distributed and rooftop solar. So from your experience, how are these smart grid technologies supporting reliability and resilience on the grid? What specifically are you able to do that you wouldn't be able to do otherwise to support reliability?
So if you take this, before this, what I presented before this system, essentially we are managing like 3,500 of distributed energy resource plants, essentially sort of like blind. So we know that generation is exist on the network, but sort of like we don't know actually what happened in real time. So what happened after these systems, we essentially know like what we couldn't do before after this system. Like we sort of like real time, we have visibility some other way, like AMIO through these IoT devices. And again, like we're ahead of like 1 hour or 15 minutes, we have a forecasting sort of arrangement. So our operators like well prepared for what sort of managements. And again, real like generation management, rather than like you call someone and ask to act, or we wait for that confirmation. In real time, you could able to manage all these systems. That is where this resilience and that security or what you call like reliability differences coming up.
Great. Thanks, Rifnas. And Theory, that was a great discussion of virtual power plants and readiness across Southeast Asia. How do these virtual power plants enable affordability? So not just reducing costs for people who can afford electric vehicles and rooftop solar, but maybe how does it help with affordability for everyone?
Thanks for the question, Debbie. We've talked about the reliability, dispatchability for the VPPs. The affordability is often where the debate goes. And my honest answer is that the VPP did not automatically improve the affordability for everyone. But in fact, we need to improve it by the program design and the for example, like the VPP helps reducing the peak demand when we can provide the dispatchability during our peaks. When we design the system and the program carefully, start from the beginning, so that we can make that affordability indirectly. So, for example, when I was I visited the SNAC, the solar and the battery energy storage system exhibition in the conference that was in Shanghai last week. And I visited some laboratory and research center of the IoT inverters and some the products in the potential coming in the upcoming years. So that means I do not see technology is not a barrier, and I see the technology is an opportunity. And the thing is the regulators and the utilities and the program designer decide who will benefit from the program. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks, Terry. Om, you talked about electric vehicle to grid, and you mentioned that you had to set up some new standards to allow for that grid injection from the electric vehicles. Can you talk to us more about what codes and standards you had to establish to ensure safe and reliable injection of power from the EVs to the grid, and maybe what challenges you had in doing this?
Okay, well, for the code that we discussing with the distribution utilities, because the electric vehicle and the charger connect with the distribution grid, right? So we have to test with them, and we have to confirm with them how different between the bidirectional charger and the inverter. But that we test with MEA and PA distribution utility, we found that they say that it's almost the same like inverter, PV inverter, that they already have the inverter code. Every equipment before install in the household have to pass their inverter code first. So I think it's gonna get the inverter code of the bidirectional charger. They adjust a little bit from the technical side. So that is a code that we are talking about. Before we use the bidirectional charger in the household, but EGAT need the frequency regulation to control the whole country. So that's why in terms of the system operator who take care the whole country have to talk with and test with the distribution utilities. But for the standard, we think we will use the international standard by using the OCPP 2.1 to control the charger directly. And for the charger and communication protocol from the charger and the car, we are using ISO 15118.20 from Sharin for international to avoid communication between, we control the Chinese OEM, we control the German OEM, something like that. So we have to use the international. So that's why for the whole country, we have to set the standard that we will use for the whole country, and we have to set the code with the distribution utility. It's lucky we have just two utility. It's easy to discuss with them. Yeah.
Great, thanks, Om. Let's turn now to microgrids. Jonathan, you talked about the energy management systems used in microgrids and the system architecture for this. So who and where are you seeing best practices in this area? Who's a leader in this area?
Well, the best practice, I still think that we from the consultants. Basically, we need to size the batteries, the PV in a proper manner. So we cannot just oversize or undersize the whole system. So once you oversize or undersize, your battery will not get chance to fully charge, or neither your battery will be discharging too fast. So you need to really have a good consultant to assist the site owner or the business owner with all microgrid projects. So the best practice, well, I think there's no such thing as who is a market leader. Everybody will be a good.
Yeah, I don't mean so much who's a market leader, but are there some good example projects that you could talk to?
Yeah, we have done several projects. I think one of the most memorable one for me will be the COVID center in Singapore. So when we have a COVID outbreak, actually the government set up a COVID center. That's where we install batteries and solar PV. And later stage, they even add in like an EV charger, and we going into even like a energy arbitrage. Yeah. So that's a very memorable project for me because our guys have to really don the whole PPE, protective suit, when they are doing the commissioning and setting up the whole site.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that was a difficult time. Thank you. Paolo, you've shown a lot of use cases, benefits from microgrids. Where do you expect to see the most growth in microgrids in the next 5 years? What do you think the future is?
Yeah, in terms of growth in microgrids, actually here in the country, 97 to 98%, only 97 to 98% of our population has access to has access to energy. On top of that, so we have 3 to 2% who completely does not have any access into energy or the unserved. But part of that 97, I said earlier, portion of it are actually underserved. So meaning they don't have 24/7 access to energy. So with that statistics, with that being said, I would say still rural electrification is a promising space for microgrid. Companies or MGSPs are still exploring energy as a service type of business model for this kind of cases. Other than that, CNI is also a promising space with our distribution utilities already starting their exploration as well onto how they're going to respond with all these advances into energy like distributed energy resource management systems or DERMS. So there's a lot of promising space that we can see into the CNI. Unfortunately, I cannot say the same thing as what said, because here in the Philippines, we have a lot of distribution utility companies. So we don't have just two, there's a lot. We even have co-ops on far-flung areas who are, if I may say, financially challenged onto really advancing their technology, onto advancing their equipment. So that's one of the challenge I can see as to why the growth of microgrid in the CNI space could actually be limited.
Great. Thanks, Paulo. I'd like to invite folks from the audience, if you do have questions, to come up to this microphone here in the center. And while people are thinking about questions and coming up to the microphone, I'd like to ask the panelists, what do you think are the biggest barriers to implementation of the particular technologies that you presented in your talks? Are there breakthroughs that could redefine the situation? Does anyone want to start?
In our experience, it's not just technology is a barrier. Technology, we can come up with a different type of it's readily available. With our experience with what I presented, what we feel is regulatory and commercial framework. We are being in this industry there's mostly a private-owned power plants. These assets are belonging to private party. So the obligations of obligations and responsibility of these private partners and the utility has to be defined in a well-defined manner, so that will help to leverage more out of the technology we invest. So what I feel like for these particular real-time monitoring or like control or renewable energy management, for those things, regulatory and commercial aspect has to be well defined. So from that point, the technology will adapt and actual output will follow.
Great, thanks, Rifnas. Does anyone else have barriers to implementation of microgrids, virtual power plants?
Yeah, for me, I think I wouldn't say it's a barrier, but probably the authority needs to look into the fire safety for batteries and PV setup. And also as we are moving on to a new AI era, so a lot of focus will be on the cybersecurity. So nobody wants their site to be hacked and then play punk on the site. So basically, I think cybersecurity and fire hazard are the two important things that we need to look into.
Great, thanks. Paulo, did you have something to add?
Yeah, perhaps just to add on what my colleagues here said, not necessarily barrier, but I think points to consider for us to transgress into or transcend into this development of technology. And this, I'd like to tackle that actually not only on the microgrid space, but on the technology applied to powering grid as a whole. So I think one thing that has to be considered or has to be addressed is the level of curiosity and the willingness of stakeholders to actually explore this kind of technology. As I mentioned earlier, the technology is out there. It's how actually we're going to justify the benefits that that technology could actually bring, considering the current state of the businesses, like for example, the current state of the country, the current state of the market. That's where strong business cases actually has to come into play. It cannot be just a fully technical, technological discussion. It has to be both technical and business aspect discussion for us to really transcend.
Thanks. Does anyone else have a, yes, Alan?
Yeah, for the VGI, I think we have to confirm the technology readiness is ready for deploy or not. Sometimes we have to wait until we have standard. Sometimes we have to develop some equipment by ourselves. After that, we have to convince the OEM to join with us, and we have to show them what they can get when they join with us. Another thing is we have to convince the customer and the policymaker and the regulator to establish the regulation. This is a barrier that we learn from pilot project when we know that how can we do. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good point. There's so many different actors involved now that you need to integrate into solutions. Terry?
I'd like to add a few that if we talk about the VPP, so most of the people think that VPP is too early, it is not mature yet, and it is not true. And if the technology is there, the thing is we need to diagnose what the real situation is. Every country, the landscape is different, so we need to diagnose the real situation, start from the pilot, and we can scale up.
Great, thanks. And apparently, you can also ask questions on the Whova app, and you can vote on questions. So but you can also step up to the mic. So someone's asked, surprisingly, all presentations are pretty much focused on EV, solar, and batteries. What about the biggest demand contributors in the region, air conditioning and cooling loads? Why are we not managing them more intelligently? Does anyone want to take that one on?
As my understanding is the heating and cooling, it's gonna be the biggest load, and the control of the smart thermostats and for the demand response and frequency response would be the solution. And the solution, the technology was there already.
Anyone else have?
From my perspective, I think it depends on the air conditioning that we use. If for the residential side, Thailand is very hot, you know already. So I think when we increase the temperature up, it's very hot. They cannot comfort. But when you already have the electric vehicle, when you buy it, right? So when we discharge energy back to the household, you can use the demand response without the with the comfortable, right? So it's easier than reduce the power from the air conditioning. Something that we think about it.
Great, thanks. Anyone else want to take on that question? Okay. Peter, do you have a question?
Hi, Peter DuPont from Asia Clean Energy Partners. I have a question following up on that from Setasit, which is, so in your VGI projections, how much peak demand do you expect that the vehicles will be able to provide? In other words, offset at peak times. And then a follow-up question, I'm really interested in this idea of virtual power plants. I know it's going to be discussed also later this week. And it seems like a good opportunity to take, that's what we're doing. We're taking solar, we're taking batteries, we're taking EVs, and we're basically creating, and end uses, which was the previous question, and creating a dispatchable power plant. Is that something in the plan for EGAT?
Yeah, definitely. This is our plan and our PDP plan from the policymaker. For the first question, the megawatt that we need is 2,000 megawatt that we expect to get from electric vehicle only, because each electric vehicle can serve around 7 kilowatt power. If we have around 600,000 units, we can have around 4 gigawatt capacity. So we think we can reach 2 gigawatt by electric vehicle only. I believe that.
Right. And also for people, don't know, 40% of new car sales in Thailand are electric vehicles. Maybe more now, it's a lot, right?
Yeah.
And so what about if you take the 2 gigawatts, what about if you add in the demand response, especially air conditioners, because that's the biggest load, into the dispatchable power through VPP? Are you going to do that?
For the air conditioner, that we think it very hard to increase the temperature from the air conditioner. That's why we move to utilize the battery from electric vehicle. It's easier way to get that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great, thanks so much. So again, please come to the microphone if you want to ask a question. There's also, maybe we'll turn to a question on microgrids. What's the levelized cost of electricity for your microgrids compared to grid power in the locations or countries where you are operating?
Oh, that's a tough question for me. So I didn't actually catch the question.
Basically, microgrids tend to cost more than grid power, and about how much more is the microgrid power than?
Well, it is very difficult to measure it in this way, because microgrid setup is like an initial investment. So you invest for the first time, and then you can have the renewable energy sources for the next 15, 20 years, because that's a typical lifespan for a PV panel. For batteries, now it's about 10 to 15 years. Whereas grid power, you still have to continue to pay. And the price you pay depends very much on the oil pricing. So with like the recent war, I think for Philippines, your tariff spiked up to at least 40%, 30, 40%. Yeah, so it's like whether you want to invest now and enjoy later, or you say that, no, I don't want to invest now, but I suffer later.
It's a good way to put it.
Yeah,
Paula, do you want
I'm not sure if I I caught the question properly, but if the question is referring to per kilowatt hour, peso per kilowatt hour, perhaps, I would make an assumption that the microgrid service providers actually offers lower peso per kilowatt hour compared to distribution utility service provider. For the reason that, as mentioned earlier, most of the microgrid applications are actually being done on an energy as a service type of business case, wherein all the capex spent plus the revenue of the MGSPs are being spread on a certain number of years. So the point of consideration also in doing this type of business is to electrify people who are at the far-flung areas. So I'm going to be honest, I don't have numbers on my mind right now as to how big or how small the difference is, but I would assume that's the current setup in the market.
Great, thanks, Paulo. And we have a question from the audience.
Grayson Hefner, independent consultant working on utility modernization. Just want to take a different spin on Peter's question. So if you had your dream microgrid or your dream combination of different distributed energy resources, which ones would you go to? Would you go to rooftop solar alone, rooftop solar for plus house storage, rooftop solar plus house storage plus EVs, or all of those plus demand response? I mean, that's kind of like you have a whole potential portfolio of microgrid resources. So what would be the dream portfolio that you might put together?
Thanks. I mean, this can also be applied for virtual power plants.
So it's a dream. I'm assuming there's no right or wrong answers, right? Anyway, for me, ideally, perhaps I would put solar PV into the mix, house storage into the mix, EV into the mix, and of course, I would still have distribution utility, as a, initially as a primary source. But since you're talking about ideal setup from my end, it would be good to have it as a backup instead. That's distribution utility connection or the grid connection. But of course, that's the ideal setup. But if we're going to consider a lot of other aspects like fire hazards, capital to actually do that, there's, I might actually revise that dream of mine.
Gary?
I'd like to add a few that, for example, like if we are going with the inclusive market mechanism for all the consumers, so the brain of the platform, they can send the price signal to the consumer, so the consumer can decide if you're accepting the price signal. So it's all about the real-time management, where the response will coming from, which resources we are. Thanks.
Thanks, Terry. Anyone else? All right, I've got a question for Rifnas about DER experience in Sri Lanka. Do you collect local weather data of renewable power plants at your control center? Do you bring in weather data from the renewable?
As of now, forecasting is based on a commercial model based out of Sri Lanka. The model is provided by a provider based out of Sri Lanka. But for the ground-mounted plant, we have about 145 plants. For those plant owners has a radiation data, and they have the weather monitoring system. From that one, we pull data. So these days we are focusing on arrangement. It's like ongoing projects. Like we had to come up with target is to come up with our own model, our own solar forecasting model with the radiation data and all. But as of now, is the production level, we are pulling up the data directly from the third-party vendor, and he sourced the data from the satellite and other means. So one thing we observed, those models, sometimes Sri Lanka is being an island with very limited geographical area. Those models coming up from the commercial one hardly match the actual renewable data. So as we have both the real-time information and the weather model data and all, we now focusing on having come up with our own model for the Sri Lankan context.
Okay, great. Thanks, Rifnas. So we've got 5 minutes left, and I'd like to give everyone 1 minute each to do a lightning round for your final key takeaway, either from the session or from your talk that you want the audience to go home thinking about. What main key takeaway do you want to impart? Sure, Theory?
Yeah, so my key takeaway is if I have to repeat, the technology is an opportunity. The deployment of the VPP, the speed, it's determined by the utilities and the regulation, how we minimize the gap, the pace, because technology innovation is very fast and the regulation and policy are following the pace of the technology. So we need to think how to minimize the gap as much as we could. And yeah, that's my key takeaways.
Thank you, Theory.
I think just a quick excerpt from my presentation earlier. Digital and electric laid the foundation to new world of electricity or new electricity world. It is actually no longer an option, but it's actually coming perhaps on a different phases or different speed for each country, but definitely the new electricity world is coming. And we have the opportunity to actually build a greener, a more sustainable and smarter power grid.
Thank you, Paulo. Jonathan?
Okay, so I think my key takeaway for this session is the importance of the EMS system. So basically, like I mentioned earlier, we should not take it lightly that each and individual devices can actually manage the whole system. You really need a professional EMS system that can do the job, redistribute the energy in an efficient and effective way. Remember, I said earlier, nobody wants a plug and play system. Make sure you buy the system and then you work the way you want it to be so that you will not have nightmare the next 2 years.
Thanks, Jonathan.
The barriers are real, like technical and regulatory and commercial on this spectrum. All those barriers are like not something it's unsolvable. It's definitely solvable, but the right question has to be asked. Like rather than always asking like what technology we should deploy, rather than asking that question, we have to check that in a different way. Like what sort of problem we are going to solve, what sort of solution we are expecting, rather than focusing on technology. If you ask right from there, then everything will follow.
Mm-hmm. That's a very good point.
Yeah, I would say set a small pilot project and learning by doing, engage the people, all stakeholders that have to work together. This is our experience that we found from the pilot project.
Yeah, good point. There's so many different actors you need to work with. I wanted to thank our presenters one more time for a very excellent, informative panel. I wanted to thank Om and Rifnas and Theory and Jonathan and Paolo and also Peter, who did the stage setting. And so please join me in giving them a round of applause. And with that, I think we have a break for half an hour, and then we'll be coming back here for session 4.2. Thanks.